When you open the door to that car and you get in, like most really good cars, it takes you to a little bit of a different place and sets up your experience, whatever it is. Again, the smell, the sound, the feeling, it just sets a stage. If you just come home, you're tired, you need to decompress, it can transport you, take you to a different place, and I use it that way too. If I have something to think about, something to work through, clears your head, focuses you, helps you think. For me at least, in those moments I can find clarity, where maybe just sitting still on my back porch trying to think about something, I wasn't getting there. But if I get in the car and I go for a drive, and the scenery changes around me, and I'm inside that little cocoon and doing my thing on that stage, I think a little bit better. When I was in residency, I remember pulling up behind one, and it was the first time I had seen one. And it's just like, wow, I mean, that is a beautiful automobile. So, the 550, Ferrari 550 Maranello was etched in my mind at that moment, the way things are etched in our minds as car guys. And never forgot it, obviously. First time that I got in it, shut the door, put it in first, rolled down the highway. The very first feeling that I had was, this thing is so solid. Not the feeling I was expecting to have. I was expecting, I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting the predominant feeling to be, oh, this is so solid. You might expect that in like a German car, but maybe not in an Italian sort of grand touring supercar-ish sort of a thing. You're not thinking solid, you're thinking beautiful, you're thinking, sounds great. You're thinking a lot of things, but solid, but that was the first thing that struck me. I mean, it's just solid. For me, the 550 embodies a balance of supercar level performances, especially in its day. Now, supercars and everything's gotten a lot faster. But supercar level performance for the day, call it super touring. Not showy, not flashy, just if you know, you know. But the combination of what that car has, what its capabilities are, is just not reproducible and will never be reproduced. I mean, V12s are not a thing. They're not going to go back and make V12 gated manuals at Ferrari anytime soon. So to have a car that at the time was really about the fastest thing that you could buy. This is just the most expensive Ferrari that you could buy in the time, and arguably the fastest car in the world at the time, kind of going back and forth with the Lamborghini. So it was all of that before you could go out and buy a Pagani or go out and buy a Bugatti or go out and buy a Koenigsegg or any of these other, incredible cars that didn't really have a place at the time. So this is my 1999 Ferrari 550. Specs are Grigio titanium over Bordeaux. Only exterior options really you could get in 1999 were colors. This one does have the later arriving Barchetta wheels on it. three-piece by Speedline, some of the prettiest wheels ever in my humble opinion. The design of this car pulls back to long bonnet V12 design from Ferrari, starting back with the 250. And this has 250 elements all over it, especially here in the front. You have the fog lights in the grille like the 250. You have the hood scoop like the 250. You also have covered headlights like the 275. Gills on the side, harking back to both of them. Oil cooler vent here on the driver's side rear quarter. Moving to the back, the car is lower and wider than it first appears. When you get to the back, you can see that more so. The car is actually 76 inches wide, which is pretty wide even by today's standards. Back here, 4-round Ferrari taillights, pretty iconic, especially in the late 90s. But going back to the Daytona, which is really the true predecessor to this car, 4-round taillights in the trunk and 4 tailpipes. Moving back around to the side, lines flow nicely from the wide hips into the sides and back across to the front. Of note, if you pull the hood on this car, you will see that the hood insulation rests right on top of the engine. This was the last design that you were allowed to do that. After that, safety regulations mandated that there be a clearance between the hood and the underside of the bonnet. The hunt was a couple years worth of looking, watching the market, trying to figure out what was worth what and why it was worth what it was or wasn't worth, accounting for how much major services were going to be and whether or not they had been done and what to look out for. But as I'm going through the learning and learning the market, you began to realize that there's just not that very many of them. They made 3,080-ish cars from 1997, late 96, through 2001. Made 448 Barchettas, if I'm correct, open-top versions. There's just not a lot of them. By modern car standards, that's not a lot of cars. So at any given time, they're publicly for sale. I might be able to find 9 or 10, these days even less. So you were always choosing from a handful of cars in private hands and dealer hands and trying to figure out what was good or what wasn't. So a normal process for car guys. I knew there were some options that I would like to have, but I also knew that intelligently, when you're searching for a needle in a haystack, you're really better off buying the car's history, buying what's happened to the car, where it's been. Buy that, not the spec. Don't fall in love with a particular color combination and narrow everything down and just say that's what I have to have. It's tempting to do that because you've got a vision in your head and this is your dream car, but in reality, buying the spec can lead you into trouble. So I wasn't willing to settle too much on spec and I wasn't willing to settle too much on history, so I found that car in Philadelphia, and that turned out to be a great experience. Since I've had it, it runs better now after putting 5,000 or 6,000 miles on it in the last year. It runs better now than it did the moment I got it. It only has 27,000 miles on it now, and I got it with almost 21. But it runs better now. It does better when it's used. I think the car is absolutely a turning point, and as a turning point, it's the beginning of the end of an era in as much as it went back to a front engine V12 configuration. And you can tell that when you look at the binnacle, it's 2 round Speedo tack. They're the same size. You don't have a center tack where it's meant to, be that way so that you can time your ultra quick up and down shifts with your paddles. So more traditional layout, just because you're shifting it yourself, and these two dials are kind of equally important. The exhaust is valved. It's valved for sound, obviously, but it's also valved because it creates back pressure, so you have some torque at low revs. It has a multi-plane intake where the intake can be long, either along long runners or short, or lengthened long runners, depending on whether or not you want top end power or bottom end power. So it's tractable, it's usable. It's not loud, it's not meant to be, it's just meant to be fast and get you from point A to point B in impeccable style. That's what it's meant to do. And that's what they designed it for. And back then they called it the boss's car. So Montezemolo put this car, envisioned it, didn't like the direction Ferrari was going in at the time. This is, Testarossa and 348 era. And so we've got to build a good car. So it was designed to be serviceable. It was designed to be usable. It was designed to, you could ride down the road and have a conversation with the person sitting next to you. And in doing so, it was also a 199 tongue-in-cheek, 200-mile-an-hour car. So a usable 200-mile-an-hour car, that's a novel concept even today, I might argue. And certainly not one with a gated manual and a little bit of theater to go with it. The history of the car, of the shape of the car, of how it came to be, is all just intensely interesting to me. There are no wings on the car. It has a small rear spoiler. The under tray is fully covered. The car was developed with around 4,800 hours in wind tunnel testing, which was unprecedented at the time. So that's how it gets to achieve that speed. The dampers on it are electronically controlled, which was a new thing as well. So a switch on the dash made the dampers firmer or not through the ECU. That was not the first time that had been done, but between the active exhaust and the adjustable dampers, which were inevitably soft, there was not like a true race setting like we might think of today, but it was less firm and firm, but not race. But still, those components of the car kind of add up to an experience that is unique to a 550.